For centuries, believers and historians have searched for physical traces of the life of Jesus. And remarkably, some objects connected to his final moments, at the cross, the tomb, and the resurrection, are believed to have survived for 2,000 years. Today, we uncover the 10 most extraordinary relics said to have touched the body of Jesus. These ancient artifacts continue to inspire faith, spark debate, and stand as powerful reminders of the story that changed the world. 1. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb that changed history. For 2 millennia, millions of pilgrims have visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, insisting it is the tomb where Jesus rose from the dead. But one great question always hung in the air. Was this really the right place? For centuries, no one dared to verify it. The mystery was literally sealed beneath a heavy marble slab. Then, in 2016, a team of scientists and archaeologists received a historic permit. For the first time in 500 years, they would move the stone to restore it. But what they found when they lifted the slab would change everything. Could shatter 2 millennia of faith or confirm it forever. First, with utmost care, they lifted the top layer of marble, revealing another slab. This one was far more ancient, bearing a crudely carved cross. The anticipation reached its peak. They lifted the second slab, and there it was, the cave's original bedrock. Scientific analysis spoke with unmistakable clarity. The cave dated back to the 1st century, the exact time of Christ. The tomb was authentic, but the greatest discovery was not what they found. It was what was missing. Jesus' body wasn't there. The tomb was empty. That absence is the heart of Christianity. As the angel said to the women who came to the tomb, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen." No founder of any other great religion has an empty tomb, only Christ. But how did they know from the beginning that it was the right tomb? The Gospel of John recounts that after the crucifixion, a wealthy man named Joseph of Arimathea claimed the body of Jesus. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb. And because that tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. That tomb was sealed. But after the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, all trace of that small garden was lost for nearly 3 centuries. The sacred place had vanished. That remained true until the 4th century, when Empress Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, journeyed to the Holy Land, determined to find the places where Christ had walked, died, and risen. Her mission was to find Jesus' tomb, and she found it. Helena identified the exact site of Jesus' tomb, and her son, Emperor Constantine, ordered a basilica built to protect the most sacred place on earth. Since then, this basilica has survived everything: invasions, desecrations, fires, and earthquakes. Yet it still stands. Inside lies the heart of the faith, a small shrine called the Edicule. It shelters Christ's empty tomb and is divided into 2 chambers. The first is the Chapel of the Angel, where it's believed the women heard the announcement that would change the world forever. "Do not be afraid. I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen." And the second room is the burial chamber. It holds the original stone slab where his body once lay. For centuries, that stone was covered in marble, hidden from everyone's view. But in 2016, when scientists removed the slab covering the tomb for restoration for the first time, something extraordinary happened. As they exposed the original stone where Christ's body had rested, Witnesses say a soft, serene light emanated from it, a radiance no scientist could capture or explain. Today, the tomb is sealed once again for preservation. But millions of pilgrims still keep coming. They kneel, touch the stone, and pray, convinced they are at the very spot where death was defeated. Whoever steps into the Holy Sepulchre today feels they are in a singular place. The air smells of ancient incense, candles flicker in the dimness, and prayers in dozens of languages weave into a single murmur. It isn't a museum or a monument. It's the place where history split in two. Here, death was conquered and hope was born never to die again. This is the epicenter of Christianity, the holiest ground on earth, which leads to a disconcerting question. If this is the heart of the faith, who holds its keys? The answer is surprising. The keys are not held by the Pope, nor by the Orthodox, nor by any Christian patriarch. Since the 12th century, the keys to the Holy Sepulchre have been in the hands of two Muslim families. Yes, the most sacred site for Christians is guarded by two Muslim families who open its doors every morning. How could this have happened? In the 7th century after the Crusades, control of the Holy Sepulchre became an extremely contentious issue. Catholics, Orthodox, Greeks, Armenians, everyone claimed the right to be the owners of the church. The disputes grew so fierce that brawls broke out inside the very sanctuary. Then, in 1187, Sultan Saladin made a brilliant move to impose peace. He entrusted the custody of the keys to the Holy Sepulchre to two neutral Muslim families, the Nusaybs, tasked with opening the door, and the Judaizers, charged with guarding the keys. In this way, no Christian branch could claim authority because the Muslims, neutral in these internal quarrels, became the arbiters of access. And that's still how it is today. Today, more than 800 years later, these two families continue their mission, opening and closing the basilica's doors every morning and every night. But there's more. Because tensions have flared so often, a very strict agreement was put in place. No one may change anything without everyone else's consent. Which is why, on the facade of the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre, there's a wooden ladder propped beneath a window. That ladder has sat there unmoving for more than 250 years. Unmoved. The catch is that the ladder belongs to several denominations at once, and no one can move it because doing so would require unanimous agreement, a consensus that has never been reached. Although there have been attempts to remove it, every time someone tried, protests erupted and it was put back in the very same place. Today, it's known as the immovable ladder, and it has become a symbol of the tensions among the Christian communities that share the Holy Sepulchre. But there are two more things that strike those who visit Jesus' empty tomb. First, the cross and the tomb are in the same place, inside the very same building. Yes, inside the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre, the place where Jesus died on the cross, Golgotha or Calvary, and the tomb where they laid him are only a few steps apart. That's why when you enter the church, you can head to the tomb or you can climb a steep staircase. And when you reach the top, there is the rock of Calvary, the very rock where they fastened Jesus' cross. Death and resurrection separated by just a few yards. What the Gospels tell over chapters, here you experience in minutes. But there's something else. The burial chamber that once held Jesus' body is small and low. To see the place, you first have to bow. You have to stoop. You can't enter upright. You have to stoop to pass through the small doorway. That gesture has become part of the place's ritual. It is an act of humility and deep reverence before beholding glory. The contrast is stark. You climb Calvary standing tall, straining. You enter the tomb bent low, vulnerable. And once inside, everything changes. The space is minimal. The place is so small you feel close to it all. It's an intimate, personal moment. In this way, the architecture makes you small so you can step into the greatest mystery of all, the place where death was defeated. Thousands of pilgrims experience it every year. They climb to see where Jesus died and then stoop to see where he rose. They touch the cold stone. They pray in silence and they leave transformed. But inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right as you enter, something stops everyone. A stone slab on the floor. It is the stone of anointing. This is the place where Jesus' body was laid when he was taken down from the cross. The stone that held the lifeless body of the Son of God was tenderly prepared for the tomb. That heartbreaking moment happened here. Today, pilgrims who enter the Holy Sepulchre come upon it right away. It's a block of reddish stone, polished by the centuries. What's striking is that despite the passage of time, many accounts say the stone still releases a strong fragrance like balm or myrrh, an echo of the perfumes with which Christ was anointed. But there is another object connected to Jesus that still exists, one that did more than witness his death. It wrapped him completely, preserved his final likeness, and holds a mystery no one has been able to explain. The Shroud of Turin. In a cathedral in Turin rests something extraordinary. At first glance, it doesn't look like much. A linen cloth about 13 feet long and 3 feet wide, yellowed by the centuries. But it was known as the Holy Shroud, the burial cloth that wrapped Jesus' body after the crucifixion. And in 1898, an amateur photographer changed history forever. Secondo Pier took a photograph and, when he developed the glass plate in his darkroom, what on the cloth had looked like little more than a blur became, on the negative, the clear, detailed image of a crucified man. The figure was that of a man between 30 and 40 years old, bearded and long-haired, and his body told a story of extreme violence. The torso scourged, the forehead wounded by thorns, wrists and feet pierced by nails, the side thrust through, knees injured by falls, and a shoulder marked as if it had carried an enormous weight. Every wound matched the gospel accounts of the Passion of Christ. But one detail baffled everyone. The image of the man of the shroud is anatomically accurate. The wounds align with what we now know about Roman crucifixion. The nails are not in the palms as medieval paintings usually show, but in the wrists, the only place capable of bearing the body's weight without tearing. This fact was unknown in the Middle Ages. So how could a supposed medieval forger have known it centuries before it came to light? The mystery had only just begun. The Shroud of Turin became the most studied relic in history. Science tried to offer an answer. In 1988, radiocarbon testing dated the shroud to the Middle Ages between 1260 and 1390. Researchers declared it a well-crafted forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. But soon a glaring flaw in the test came to light. The samples had been taken from a corner repaired by nuns in the 16th century after a fire. They had analyzed a patch contaminated with much newer threads. The debate burst open again, louder than ever. Scientists returned to the cloth and found something astonishing. Embedded in its fibers were pollen grains from plants that grow only in Jerusalem and its surroundings. Some of them, like Gundelia tourneforte, bloom only in spring, the season of Jewish Passover, the season of the crucifixion. The Gospel of John recounts, "So they took the body of Jesus and wrapped it in linen with aromatic spices according to the burial custom of the Jews. And as they studied the cloth, something defied explanation. The image itself is not paint. There are no pigments, no brushstrokes. It's an incredibly superficial scorch touching only the outermost fibers of the linen without penetrating it. And it even carries three-dimensional information." In 1976, NASA entered the picture, and when it used a VP8 image analyzer, a device designed to map planetary surfaces, it revealed something astonishing. The image contained three-dimensional data. Process it and the face and body rise in perfect relief like a laser scan. No flat painting or photograph can do that. What kind of energy could produce an image like this? Some scientists speak of a burst of radiation, a brief intense flash that seared the cloth as if the body emitted a pulse of light in a single instant. Something science can't explain, but the scriptures describe with precision the resurrection. But there's another puzzling detail. A corpse wrapped in cloth for more than 36 hours leaves traces of decomposition. Not here. The shroud is clean. There are no signs of decay. It's as if the body simply vanished from within without disturbing the linen. As Scripture recounts, when Peter reached the tomb, he saw the linen cloths lying there. But the cloth that had been over Jesus' head was not with the linens. It was rolled up in a place by itself. The shroud story is steeped in mystery. It appears in the record in 14th century France, guarded by a knight. Yet many believe it was earlier the enigmatic Mandelion of Edessa, a cloth venerated in the East since the 6th century that showed a face not made by human hands. What is certain is that in 1578, it arrived in Turin. And since then, it has outlasted wars, plunder, and fires. In 1997, another blaze threatened to destroy it. But a firefighter managed to rescue it by smashing the armored glass at the last moment. That moment made it a symbol of survival, as if its story were destined never to be extinguished. Today, the Holy Shroud rests in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, covered, guarded, and displayed only on rare occasions. Millions of pilgrims travel to behold it in silence, convinced that before them stands the mute witness to the instant when death was conquered. But the story doesn't end here. Scientists found something else on the cloth. They detected traces of real human blood on the wounds, AB blood type, which is rare. The blood showed a biochemical peculiarity. It contained high levels of bilirubin, something seen in the body of a person who has died under extreme physical stress and torture. And then the scientists asked a question. Could this blood be the same as the blood found on the Sudarium of Oviedo, the cloth that, according to tradition, covered Jesus' face right after his death? And they decided to run the definitive test, compare the two blood analyses. 3. The Sudarium of Oviedo. There is a cloth in Spain known as the Sudarium of Oviedo. It measures only about 80 centimeters in length and, according to tradition, is the cloth that covered Jesus' face as he was taken down from the cross before he was wrapped in the Holy Shroud. The Gospel of John mentions it explicitly. He saw the linen cloths lying there and the face cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths but rolled up in a place by itself. From the beginning, Christians understood there were two cloths, a large shroud that covered the whole body and this smaller one, the Sudarium, that shielded Jesus' face. But unlike the Holy Shroud, this cloth bears no image, only blood stains. And those stains tell with forensic precision the suffering of a man crowned with thorns, with a bloodied nose and mouth, and signs of death by asphyxiation, the ultimate cause of crucifixion. The large central stain around the nose and mouth, along with traces of pleural fluid, reveals the agony of a traumatic death by asphyxiation on the cross. Forensic science has studied these stains to uncover what happened. First, the cloth was placed over the face while the body was still upright on the cross. Hence, the presence of fresh blood mingled with clotted blood. Then, the fabric appears to have been folded around the head, leaving marks on the back as well. Later, when the body was taken down to prepare it for burial, they carefully removed this cedarium and wrapped the body completely in the holy shroud. Thus, this small cloth is like a fragment of the story of Calvary at Golgotha. Then, the moment of truth arrived. The scientists decided to compare the blood tests from the Shroud of Turin with those from the Cedarium of Oviedo. Could two cloths, separated by thousands of miles, tell the same story? The answer will leave you speechless. First, both cloths share the same blood type, AB. That type is very rare in Europe but far more common in the region where Jesus lived, the Middle East. But there's more. The scientists digitally overlaid the blood stains from the cedarium onto the face image on the shroud. The fit was perfect. The wounds, the shape of the nose, the mouth, the forehead, everything aligned down to the millimeter, as if the two linens had been in contact with the same head. And the analyses revealed even more striking details. In the fabric's fibers, they found traces of aloe and myrrh. Sound familiar? They're the very aromatic plants that, according to the Gospel of John chapter 19, Nicodemus brought to prepare Jesus' body for burial. They also found pollen grains from plants that grow only in Palestine and North Africa. That raised a new question. If the cedarium came from Jerusalem, how did it get to Spain? Its journey is documented. In AD 614, as the Persians invaded, it was hurried out of Jerusalem and taken to Alexandria, Egypt. They had to remove it from Jerusalem in 614 to protect it from the Persian invasion, and they brought it to Alexandria, Egypt. From there, it crossed the Mediterranean to Spain, fleeing the Muslim advance. Finally, a Spanish king named Alfonso II built a special and secure place to keep it, the Holy Chamber of Oviedo Cathedral, where it has remained for more than 1,000 years. What's fascinating is that while the shroud overwhelms us with the mystery of its image, the cedarium of Oviedo moves us because it is so raw and real. It is the missing piece the story was waiting for. Together, the two cloths tell the whole story. The cedarium, witness to the bloodshed on Golgotha, and the shroud, witness to the glorious body in the tomb. That detail in the Gospel of John that once seemed insignificant now takes on extraordinary meaning. There were two linens, two pieces of the same puzzle that 2,000 years later tell us through science and through faith, the story of the passion and the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. 4. The Holy Chalice in the Cathedral of Valencia in Spain. The Holy Chalice is kept, an agate cup that millions venerate as the cup of the Last Supper, the true Holy Grail. That night Jesus took a cup and spoke the words that would seal a new covenant between God and humanity. Over that cup were spoken the most momentous words in history. This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. Archaeologists have examined the chalice with modern technology, and their verdict is astonishing. Archaeologists confirm that the agate cup dates to the period between the 2nd century BC and the 1st century AD, exactly the time of Christ, and its style and material match perfectly the Jewish blessing cups used in 1st century Passover celebrations. The Holy Grail is not a medieval fantasy. It's real. Far from the gilded, jewel-studded grails of medieval legend, the original cup is humble and small, just the kind a carpenter from Nazareth would use. The base, the handles, and the jewels are much later additions, fitted on in the Middle Ages to dress it up for ceremonies. The vessel that held the blood of Christ was austere, but if it is authentic, how did it survive 2,000 years? And how did it make the journey from Jerusalem to Spain? Tradition says the Apostle Peter carried it to Rome. There the early popes and the Christian community guarded it in secret, passing it from generation to generation. It was the symbol of the covenant. Even so, the Roman Empire unleashed its persecutions. Christians were hunted and their sacred objects destroyed. Yet each generation handed the chalice to the next as its most precious treasure until the critical moment arrived. Rome blazed under Valerian's persecution in the year 258, and Deacon Lawrence, before being martyred on a gridiron, handed the chalice to Spanish soldiers. And on a clandestine voyage, the cup crossed the sea to Hispania, far beyond the empire's reach. The chalice traveled to Huesca, Lawrence's birthplace. There it remained hidden until the year 711, when the Muslims arrived. Thus began an 8th century odyssey. Christians concealed it in Pyrenean caves. They carried it from monastery to monastery until it finally reached San Juan de la Peña, an impregnable monastic stronghold in Aragon. For 400 years, the monks guarded it deep within the rock. And at last, in the 15th century, the chalice was moved to Valencia Cathedral, where it has remained safe to this day, bringing its incredible journey to a close. But its story is not just a legend. Kings and popes have revered it as authentic. Calixtus III and Benedict XV acknowledged it. And in our own time, Popes John Paul II, Benedict XV, and Francis celebrated Mass in Valencia using this very cup. "Take this, all of you, and drink from it," Jesus said that night. 2,000 years later, this cup of the first covenant is still present in the world, a silent witness to the most important night in history. And the striking thing is that the legend of the Holy Grail springs from this very relic. It all began in the Middle Ages. Troubadours and monks took the story of the cup of the Last Supper and transformed it. It was no longer just a cup. It became the Holy Grail, an object that granted eternal life, that healed mortal wounds, and that connected seekers directly to God. Yet this power wasn't for everyone. The legend was clear. Only the purest-hearted knights, those without a stain on their soul, would be worthy to find it. Thus was born the most famous quest in history, that of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. The legend grew so powerful that it sparked a search that would last for centuries. People hunted for a cup, but there was also talk of a mystical stone fallen from the sky. No one knew for sure, but kings, crusaders, and secret societies hunted it relentlessly, convinced its power would remake the world. The obsession grew. Secret crusades were launched, clandestine expeditions. Kings and popes bankrolled desperate searches. Thousands died chasing a phantom. And while thousands of knights bled out on the sands of the Holy Land, a mysterious order swelled in power and in secrets. The Knights Templar. Officially, they were warrior monks. Their stated mission was to protect pilgrims arriving in Jerusalem. But soon, unsettling rumors began to spread. Their headquarters wasn't just anywhere. It was built atop the ruins of the very Temple of Solomon. Sacred ground, where the presence of God once descended. That sparked a suspicion. What were the Templars really doing there? While some fought, other Templars did the unthinkable. They secretly dug beneath the ruins. They hunted for the most powerful relics of the faith. The Ark of the Covenant, the spear that pierced Christ, and above all, the Holy Grail. As the years passed, the Templars' wealth and influence swelled beyond imagining. The Templars became immensely rich. Their power grew so great that kings and popes owed them favors. Rumor raced across Europe like wildfire. The Templars had found the Grail. But in 1312 it all came crashing down. King Philip IV of France, envious and deep in debt, accused the Templars of heresy. He seized them, tortured them, and sent them to the stake. It seemed the end. Yet, just before he died, their leader, Jacques de Molay, hurled a curse and one last secret into the world. The Templars had been defeated, but their treasure had not. They had hidden it. So where is the Holy Grail? One clue points to a castle ablaze in France, Montségur. The story goes that just before it fell, for knights slipped away into the dark. They carried no gold, but something far more precious. Legend says it was the Grail. Another clue crosses the sea to Scotland, to a place steeped in mystery, Rosslyn Chapel. Its walls aren't ordinary stone. They're a carved map etched with Templar symbols and images of plants that didn't even exist in Europe then. This detail has baffled historians for centuries. Even now, many believe the Grail isn't in a museum, but buried right there, waiting. The Templars vanished, but their shadow and their quest endure. Later, secret orders inherited the obsession, yet no one managed to solve the riddle. The Holy Chalice even obsessed Adolf Hitler. He believed the cup of the Last Supper wasn't merely a Christian relic, but the key to a hidden force capable of granting dominion over peoples and nations. To find it, he created the Ahnenerbe, a Nazi secret society devoted to the occult and archaeology. One of its expeditions reached the monastery of Montserrat in Catalonia, Spain. The Nazis were fascinated by its craggy silhouette, ringed with medieval myths and legends. There, for centuries, rumors had circulated that the Grail was hidden by guardian monks, kept far from the reach of ambitious men. Hitler's envoys arrived in secret, met with the Benedictine monks, and combed the mountain for hidden entrances, passageways, and caves. The Nazis were convinced that if they found the cup, the Führer would be invincible. But Montserrat kept its secret. The Grail never appeared, and Hitler died without ever possessing it. What's unsettling is that while Europe went mad for centuries hunting the Grail, the true chalice rested quietly in Valencia, and cinema turned that obsession into a global phenomenon. Movies like Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade showed it as a carpenter's humble cup, while the Da Vinci Code reimagined it as a secret bloodline. In all of them, the Grail was an object of hidden power, capable of changing humanity's fate. But reality outstrips fiction in an unexpected way. What the world imagined as a golden treasure was a simple vessel, just a stone, polished by Jewish hands 2,000 years ago. Because the true power was never in the cup, but in the blood it held, and in the words that changed the world forever. The cross was the Roman Empire's most dreaded instrument of torture. In Christianity, it became the supreme symbol of redemption. Legend says the wood on which Jesus was crucified didn't vanish. It was discovered 3 centuries later by a woman, Saint Helena. Remember her? Yes, the mother of Emperor Constantine, the very one who searched for and found Jesus' tomb. In 326, Helena traveled to Jerusalem, led by faith, and ordered excavations on Mount Calvary. There, near the empty tomb, they found not one but 3 crosses. That posed a problem. How could they tell which of the 3 was Jesus? To find the true cross of Christ, they brought the 3 crosses, one by one, to the body of a man who had just died. The first 2 had no effect, but when the 3rd touched him, the man came back to life. No doubt about it, this was the true cross, the very cross that held the body of Jesus. From then on, the cross was broken into pieces and venerated around the world. The largest fragment was kept in Jerusalem, in the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre. Another piece went to Rome and another to Constantinople, the empire's new capital. The rest was split into hundreds of slivers, sent out as relics to countless churches. That scattering created a credibility problem. Centuries later, skeptics would quip that there were so many splinters you could build an entire ship. But in the 19th century, a study set out to catalog every known relic of the true cross. The result was unexpected. Adding up the volume of all the verified authentic fragments, there wasn't enough wood to form even a single cross. This suggests that while some are replicas, the original relics are far rarer than the skeptics believed. The Bible itself doesn't speak of the relic, but it does trace its root. The Gospels tell us they took Jesus and he went out carrying his cross to the place called the skull, Golgotha in Aramaic. The scene is brutal when you consider the details. The cross was no light burden. Historians estimate the patibulum, the horizontal beam laid across the condemned man's shoulders, at about 50 kilos, roughly 110 pounds. Flogged to the point of exhaustion, bleeding and weak, Jesus was forced to carry it through Jerusalem's narrow streets to the execution site outside the city walls. Along the way, the soldiers saw he could go no farther and compelled a man, Simon of Cyrene, to help bear the cross while the women of Jerusalem wept. Even in agony, Jesus paused to address them with prophetic words, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep for yourselves and for your children." The road ended at Golgotha, the place of the skull. Later, to remember this painful journey, Christian tradition formed the Via Crucis, the Way of Sorrows, a path of 14 stations that can still be walked in Jerusalem today. But Empress Helena found more than the true cross. Alongside it, she discovered something else. 6. The nails of the crucifixion. Yes, Helena also discovered the nails of Jesus' crucifixion, the iron spikes that pierced his hands and feet at Golgotha. According to Eusebius of Caesarea, Helena gave them to her son Constantine, and from them several relics were forged. One nail was embedded in his imperial crown. Another was turned into the bit of his warhorse to guide him with a divine hand in battle. And the rest were distributed to prominent churches. Today, several nails are venerated as relics. You can see them at the Basilica of the Holy Cross in Jerusalem in Rome or at the Cathedral of Milan, among others. But after 2,000 years, could they be genuine? Scientific studies on some of these nails reveal they are Roman iron, forged with first-century techniques. The studies cannot prove they were the very nails used in the crucifixion of Jesus, but they conclude they are historically possible. However, archaeology has given us an even more astonishing clue. For centuries, many imagined Jesus nailed through the palms, but in 1968 in Jerusalem, the skeleton of a crucified man was found with a 7-inch nail driven through his heel bone. This means the crucifixion described by the Gospels was a real and brutal Roman practice. Thus, what had been an instrument of torture became a symbol of victory. Emperor Constantine did not wear the nail on his helmet as a trophy of death, but as a talisman of heavenly protection. Today, the nails are venerated by thousands of believers, and they remind us of Christ's suffering and the sacrifice he made for all of us, the path to eternal salvation. But alongside the nails, Empress Helena found another object. 7. The crown of thorns. The Gospels tell how Roman soldiers wove a crown of thorns. They pressed it down on Jesus' head and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" But what they could not have imagined was that this act of humiliation would become the emblem of his eternal kingship. For centuries, the crown vanished from the historical record until Empress Helena brought it to the capital of her empire, Constantinople. There it was guarded as the most sacred treasure for more than 1,000 years. Then, in the 13th century, the Byzantine emperor went bankrupt and sold it to Louis the Minor of France, who carried it to Paris in 1239. To safeguard it, the king did not build a fortress to lock it away, but a chapel that seemed made of light, Paris's Sainte-Chapelle, a monumental reliquary of glass and gold. But if you could see the crown today, you would be surprised. It is not what you imagine. The relic is not a complete ring of thorns as we usually picture in paintings, but a circle of braided reeds to which thorny branches were later attached. Over the centuries, many of those thorns were removed and distributed as relics to churches across Europe. What remains in Paris is the ring of rushes, roughly 8 inches across, along with a few associated thorns. Strikingly, scientists have examined the object too, identifying the plant material as eastern rushes, likely from the Jordan Valley, dated to around the 1st century. The crown has survived fires, wars, and looting. Even in Notre Dame's devastating 2019 blaze, firefighters managed to save it in a dramatic rescue. It had outlasted the fall of empires, revolutions, and wars, but its greatest trial came on April 15, 2019, a night the world will not forget. The whole world watched live as Notre Dame Cathedral burned. Millions saw the central spire collapse, the roof give way, and wept, fearing that one of Christianity's most sacred relics would be reduced to ashes. But amid the chaos, through smoke and embers, a team of firefighters, led by the chaplain of the Paris Fire Brigade, Jean-Marc Fournier, risked their lives to enter the burning cathedral. Their mission wasn't to save the building, but to rescue the crown of thorns and the Blessed Sacrament. Knowing every second could be their last, they broke through the barriers, lifted the reliquary, and, under a rain of embers, managed to carry it out in the midst of the chaos. The moment became a symbol. As the cathedral burned, they emerged from the smoke with the crown in their hands. The next day, when the reliquary was shown intact, Paris and the world received it as a sign. The crown had endured once again. It was a powerful symbol. The crown, which represents Christ's suffering, was saved from the flames, an echo of the resurrection. Today, as Notre Dame is rebuilt, the crown of thorns rests in the Louvre under strict guard. It is displayed to the faithful only one day a year, Good Friday. The paradox endures. What was once an instrument of torture is now an object of veneration, and every missing thorn scattered across the world reminds us that suffering spreads, but the truth of its message remains. But Empress Helena discovered and safeguarded 2 more relics. 8. The Holy Stairs in Rome, across from the Basilica of St. John Lateran, there are 28 stone steps that conceal a secret. They are called the Holy Stairs. Tradition holds that they are the very steps from the staircase of Pontius Pilate's praetorium, the Roman governor who tried Jesus. These are the very steps Jesus climbed on the day of his trial when he was brought before Pontius Pilate. He went up them with a crown of thorns piercing his brow and his back torn by scourging. Just as the Bible says, "Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged." Upon this marble, Christ shed drops of blood as he listened to the sentence condemning him to death and heard the crowd's jeers and insults. On these steps, Pilate's question rang out, "What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ?" On these steps, the fate of the Son of God was sealed. But if the steps were in Jerusalem, how did they end up in Rome? Once again, a woman holds the answer, Saint Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine. In the 4th century, during her pilgrimage to the Holy Land, when she also found the true cross and Jesus' tomb, she came upon the Holy Stairs. Convinced that the Savior had walked those very steps, Helena ordered that they be taken to Rome. From then on, a ritual of penance was born. Pilgrims do not climb this staircase on foot. They go up on their knees. They go up on their knees praying in Our Father on each step. It is a way to relive, step by step, Christ's path to his judgment, and thousands of people still do it today. The steps bear age-old wear, deep marks carved by the millions of pilgrims who have climbed them on their knees. In some places, the marble is worn so deep that the passage of human time across the stone is unmistakable. Archaeologists have confirmed that the marble dates to the 1st century, the very era when Jesus lived, and that it comes from quarries near Jerusalem. Science backs what faith has believed for centuries. But there's something few people know about these stairs. The steps are covered with wood to protect them, but in a few places there are small glass windows. Through them you can see dark stains. Tradition says those stains are the blood of Jesus, blood that time has not been able to erase. For centuries, the faithful could only see the stains through the glass. But in 2019, for the first time in 300 years, the wood was removed, allowing pilgrims to touch the worn original marble. Believe it or not, this staircase may have sparked one of the greatest divisions in the history of Christianity. The story goes that a monk named Martin Luther once climbed these steps on his knees. He was seeking to earn indulgences, which at the time were a way to obtain the forgiveness of sins. Luther was searching for peace, but what he felt was a spiritual conflict that would change his life forever. The story goes that as he climbed in prayer, something inside him broke. He realized that climbing stairs wasn't the way to find God. The experience triggered a profound crisis of faith, sowing the seeds of doubt that would lead him to launch the Protestant Reformation. And here lies the great paradox. A staircase of judgment became a path of faith. For the thousands of believers who climb the stairs on their knees, it is a profound act, a way to accompany Christ in his suffering. Thus, these 28 marble steps ceased to be mere stone and became a living relic, a bridge that travels 2,000 years back in time to the moment of judgment that changed world history forever. And the last object Empress Helena found was 9. The tunic of Trier in the German city of Trier. An astonishing relic is kept, the holy tunic of Christ, which tradition says is the very garment Jesus wore on the day of the crucifixion. But how can we be sure it's the same garment? The Bible gives us a crucial clue. The Gospel of John describes the tunic in a very specific way. It was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. And the tunic of Tria matches that description perfectly. It is an ancient, fragile, reddish-brown piece of wool, woven all at once without a single seam. That tunic was stripped from Jesus' body at Golgotha. But the Roman soldiers, instead of tearing it to divide it among themselves, decided to cast lots to see who would get it, unknowingly fulfilling an ancient prophecy. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. But how did Jesus' tunic end up in a cathedral in Germany? Tradition says that Saint Helena discovered the tunic in Jerusalem and carried it with her to Tria, a city where she herself had once lived. Since then, Tria Cathedral has been its home. Whenever it is publicly displayed, millions of the faithful come on pilgrimage, turning the city into a center of faith. Because of its age, it has been reinforced and protected multiple times, which complicates certain scientific studies. Yet it remains an object of universal veneration. For the Christian faith, this seamless tunic is a powerful symbol of the unity of the Church, the body of Christ that cannot be divided. Just as the tunic remained intact, the Church is called to remain united. Today, the holy tunic of Tria stands as a witness of faith to that moment when Christ was stripped of everything to give himself completely. 10. The Lance of Longinus. It was a dark Friday in Jerusalem. The sky had darkened over Golgotha. Then the Roman soldiers approached the crosses. Their mission was simple and brutal: to confirm the deaths. They broke the legs of the two thieves to hasten the end. But when they came to Jesus, they stopped. He had already died. Then one of them did something unexpected. He took his spear and pierced Christ's side. And in that instant, the impossible happened. One of the soldiers opened his side with a spear, and at once blood and water flowed out. How could water flow from a dead body? The witnesses were perplexed, but the first Christians understood the mystery at once. The blood was the wine of the Eucharist, the promise of a new covenant, and the water was the cleansing of baptism, the birth into a new life. From the open wound in Christ's side, as Eve was born from Adam's side, the Church was being born. But who was the soldier who wielded the spear? The Gospels don't name him, yet the earliest Christian communities called him Longinus. He was the centurion in command, and his spear was marked by the blood of Christ. Longinus looked up. Everything he had witnessed fell into place, and with a conviction that would change his life, he declared, "Truly, this was the Son of God." That moment was no accident. It fulfilled an ancient prophecy. The prophet Zechariah had foretold, "They will look on the one they pierced." John, who stood there and saw it, would later write with solemnity, "He who saw it has borne witness. His testimony is true." There, at the foot of the cross, Longinus understood. That day, the course of this Roman soldier's life changed forever. The man overseeing Jesus' death was shaken to his core. He went from executioner to witness. At the foot of the cross, Longinus became the first Gentile to believe that he is the Son of God. He relinquished a high post in the most powerful empire on earth and joined the followers of Jesus. He carried the message to distant lands, proclaiming the gospel with the passion of one who has seen it all and been transformed. But his end was tragic. For years, he traveled through the regions of Cappadocia and Caesarea in what is now Turkey. There, Longinus preached the gospel and many believed. His testimony was powerful because he'd been there. He was the centurion who stood at the foot of the cross. But Rome does not forgive those who defy its authority. So he was pursued, and eventually Longinus was arrested. They offered him his freedom if he would deny Christ. But Longinus, serene with the peace of one who had found the truth, stood firm in his faith, and so he was condemned. The very empire that had trained him as a soldier would now execute him as a traitor. They led him to the outskirts of the city. There on a barren hill he was beheaded. Thus Longinus died a martyr in Caesarea. Today, several spears are claimed to be the true one. There's one in the Vatican, another in Armenia, and the most famous in Vienna. Scientific analyses are inconclusive, but what few know is that one of them, the Vienna spear, conceals a far darker secret. Adolf Hitler became obsessed with it when he saw it at the Hofburg Museum. He was convinced that whoever possessed it would be invincible. In 1938, he stole it and moved it to Nuremberg as a trophy of the Third Reich. But the Allies recovered it the very day he died. It was returned to Vienna, where it can still be seen today in the imperial treasury. But the spear's true power isn't found in dark legends or superstition. Its power lies in what it revealed. The Gospel reminds us that the weapon meant to confirm death became the instrument that opened the wellspring of life. The spear not only proved that Jesus had died, it showed that his death was the beginning of everything. It's not just a weapon, it is the key that opened the side from which the church was born. But there is another object, possibly the most powerful of all, one that comes from before the time of Jesus, the Ark of the Covenant. At the heart of the Old Testament appears an object so powerful that walls fell and rivers stopped at its mere presence. A chest that housed the throne of God on earth. Moses built the ark exactly as God had instructed on Sinai. Inside it lay the tablets of the law, Aaron's staff, and a portion of heavenly manna. Its power was legendary and terrifying. When Moses finished building the tabernacle in the wilderness and placed the ark in the most holy place, something happened that shook all Israel. A dense cloud descended over the tent, and the glory of the Lord filled the sanctuary with such intensity that not even Moses could enter. Before it, the Jordan River parted in two so that Israel could cross. And in its presence, the invincible walls of Jericho collapsed as if they were sand. Wherever the ark went, victory was certain. But this divine power demanded absolute reverence. No one could touch it with bare hands. Only the Levites could carry it. And even then, improper contact meant death. That's what happened to Uzzah, a man who reached out to steady the ark when it lurched so it wouldn't fall from a cart, and he was struck dead on the spot. But it wasn't only a symbol of faith. It was a fearsome weapon. Yet Israel didn't understand how to wield it and made a fatal mistake. The people of Israel were at war with the Philistines, their relentless enemies, and the first battle ended in disaster. 4,000 Israelites fell beneath Philistine swords. The camp was shaken by fear and confusion. Desperate, the elders ordered the Ark of the Covenant brought into the camp, convinced that its mere presence would give them victory. But they had forgotten that its power didn't reside in the object itself, but in obedience to God. So with great ceremony, they brought the ark from Shiloh. And when the ark entered the camp, the Israelites raised a deafening shout that made the earth tremble. The echo reached the Philistine army. But instead of fleeing, the Philistines braced themselves and fought with fury. The battle that followed was even bloodier than the first. Israel was decisively defeated. 30,000 soldiers died that day. The camp was laid waste and the worst happened. The Ark of God was captured. The sign of the divine presence, the invisible throne of Yahweh, fell into enemy hands. It was a moment of terror for Israel, but the tragedy did not end there. The two priests, Hophni and Phinehas, died in the battle. And when a messenger reached Shiloh with the news that the ark had been taken, the old priest Eli toppled backward from his seat, broke his neck and died. He had served as judge over Israel for 40 years, but he could not bear the disgrace of seeing the ark in foreign hands. So ended that dark day. Israel didn't merely lose a battle, it lost its glory, the sign of God's presence among his people. They had treated the ark like a talisman, but had forgotten the living God who was enthroned upon it. The Philistines, triumphant, carried the ark to the temple of their god Dagon in Ashdod. But the next morning, they found the statue fallen face down before the ark. They set it back up, and the next day it had fallen again, this time with its head and hands severed on the threshold as though the pagan god had been overthrown. Then the disasters began. Plagues and tumors ravaged their cities. Terrified, the Philistines moved the ark from city to city, but wherever it went, terror followed. After 7 months of calamity, the Philistines resolved to send it back. They readied a brand new cart, hitched to 2 cows that had never been yoked, and set beside the ark golden offerings shaped like tumors and mice, the emblems of the plagues they had endured. The cows, with no human guide, walked straight toward the land of Israel. And so the ark returned, proving that neither Philistines nor armies could master it. After its return from Philistine country, the ark was kept under guard for years until King David determined to bring it to Jerusalem. But it would be his son Solomon who gave the ark its permanent home. King Solomon built a temple to house it. When the ark was placed beneath the golden wings of the cherubim Solomon had commissioned, something beyond words happened. A cloud filled the temple, and the glory of the Lord covered it with such power that the priests could not remain standing. There, in the dimness, veiled by an impenetrable curtain, the high priest entered only once a year on Yom Kippur to sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice on the mercy seat. In that moment, heaven and earth met. Thus the ark, which had been a sign of victory in battle and a symbol of judgment among the nations, at last found its rest in the heart of Jerusalem within the most glorious temple ever built. It was the pinnacle of its history, the throne of God on earth in the midst of his people. For centuries it rested in Solomon's temple. Only the high priest could enter to see it once a year to make atonement for the people's sins. But that splendor would not last forever. After Solomon's death, the kingdom split and idolatry corrupted Israel and Judah. The prophets warned again and again, if the people abandoned God, Jerusalem would fall. No one listened. In 587 BC, everything changed. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon laid siege to the city, tore down its walls, and set the temple ablaze. The sacred treasures were carried off as plunder, yet the ark appears nowhere on the inventory of looted objects. It was as if it had vanished before the siege began. Here the mystery begins. Since then, one question has haunted believers and explorers for more than 2,500 years. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? An ancient clue lies in the book of 2 Maccabees. It says, the prophet Jeremiah, just before the invasion, hid it in a cave on Mount Nebo, declaring it would remain concealed until God gathers his people. Many believe it still rests there, sealed in the rock, waiting for the appointed hour. But what if it never left Jerusalem? Another theory holds that the priests hid it in the secret tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, a labyrinth now inaccessible, where it could still be waiting, just yards from its original resting place. Yet the most famous story takes us to another continent. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to guard it in a small chapel in Aksum. There, a lone monk, the guardian of the Ark, devotes his life to watching over it. No one else may see it. The search has never ceased. In the 19th century, European explorers claimed to have seen traces in Ethiopia. Israeli archaeologists tried to dig in Jerusalem, but religious conflict made it impossible to confirm anything. And during World War II, the Nazi secret society Ahnenerbe hunted for it as well, convinced it would be the ultimate weapon to secure the Reich's supremacy. They all failed. To this day, no expedition has produced definitive proof. The Ark remains an inaccessible mystery, shrouded in legends that span continents and centuries. And here is where the mystery reveals its true purpose. Perhaps the Ark was never lost. It was hidden. Its power, capable of toppling empires, was never meant to fall into human hands. Its disappearance was its greatest act of divine protection. But the story doesn't end here. The Bible offers one last astonishing clue to its fate. The book of Revelation foretells that the Ark will be seen again, not by an archaeologist, but by all humanity. Then the temple of God in heaven was opened, and the Ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. The Ark of the Covenant is not a lost treasure waiting to be found. It is a promise suspended in history, a mystery that binds Israel's glorious past to humanity's prophetic future. But there may be even more of Jesus' belongings among us, without our even knowing it. Empress Helena recovered other relics of Christ and carried them to what was then the safest place on earth, Constantinople. But many were lost in one of the darkest episodes of the Middle Ages, the sack of Constantinople. Before that catastrophe, Byzantium was the greatest Christian treasure house in the world. For centuries, it safeguarded the relics St. Helena had brought from Jerusalem in the 4th century. Among them was the purple mantle the soldiers threw over Jesus to mock him as King of the Jews. The Bible tells it like this: "They draped him in a scarlet robe and set on his head a crown woven of thorns." Imagine standing before that very piece of cloth. Beside it, they kept the reed they put in his hand as a fake scepter while they jeered at him, a symbol of the deepest humiliation turned into a sacred treasure. And some accounts claim the sponge soaked in sour wine was there, the very one a soldier used to offer him something to drink in his final moments. As the Gospel says, they filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a hyssop branch and held it to his mouth. For centuries, these relics safeguarded in Constantinople were kept as the most precious treasures of the Eastern Christian Empire. They were displayed only in solemn processions and on days of celebration. But in 1204, everything changed. The Fourth Crusade was launched. Soldiers with crosses on their chests were supposedly marching to the Holy Land, but they veered off course. Instead of fighting the enemy, they turned on their own brothers. They reached the gates of Constantinople. The Crusaders sacked the city. The capital of Eastern Christendom was desecrated and plundered by Christians from the West. In the chaos, the relics were scattered. Some were stolen and sold, ending up in cities like Venice and Paris. But many others simply vanished, lost forever. And here the true mystery begins. For centuries, these lost relics have fueled quests, legends, and mysteries, inspiring pilgrims and adventurers alike. The paradox is that the very empire that safeguarded them as its greatest treasure for nearly 1,000 years was plundered by those who came in the name of the cross. And since then, the echo of those vanished relics has reverberated through faith and history. Fragments of Christ's past that may once have existed now turned into symbols of mystery and loss. But the Bible is full of mysteries and fascinating details that prove its message is real. Many of the places mentioned in the Bible still exist today, even though most people don't know about them. If you want to discover these amazing locations, you have to watch the video on screen. 18 biblical sites that still exist today. Click on the screen. You don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching. See y'all in the next one video. If you like my channel, like and subscribe.